Right, so welcome everybody to Bad Work Stories Made Good this week. And Emma, how are you down in New Zealand? It's beautiful to see a little bit more light of Waiheke Island coming through. How are you?
Right, I'm good. Happy Matariki. So it's wow, it's Matariki week.
And what's Matariki week?
Well, this is our Māori New Year. So we have a new public holiday in New Zealand, which we got last year, was our first year, and it's Matariki, and it's our first Māori, the Indigenous people of New Zealand. So it's the first holiday, and it relates to the Māori New Year, as I just said, all about midwinter. So you're noticing there's some more light coming, but we are midwinter now, and Matariki relates to the stars that they can see at this time. We can see at this time of the year. It's the Pleiades group, which is what other people call it, and it has a feature of blue stars, luminous blue, hot blue stars. So, yeah, so it's time for us to look up at the sky. Although you can probably see the clouds behind me. There's not been a lot of stargazing at night. But it's the time for us to reflect. It's a beautiful celebration. It's all about reflecting on people we've lost, so those who've passed, and also talking about celebration of our harvest. So, you know, the year that's been, the food that's been harvested, the kai, they call it, and the kai moana, so out of the oceans. So it's a time for getting very grounded and connected with the people around us, but also our nature and our resources that we have available. So it's a beautiful thing to be celebrating. And yeah, I'm going to celebrate it with some family up in the far north, which is a beautiful place to be for Matariki. So yeah.
And do you say Happy Matariki Day? Is that the greeting?
We do. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, happy
Matariki. So anyway, what is our bad work story this week?
Well, I kind of want to glow in that beautiful welcome about Matariki instead of talking about a bad work story. But yeah, I mean that's what we're here
to do the business.
Story and make it good. Let's give it some of that blue star glow. So the bad work story for us this week comes from a industry piece that I was doing a couple of weeks ago on resilience, right? The big R word since COVID.
Yes.
And I was with a group, and the premise I put to them was, you know, is resilience becoming a dirty word, or is it actually still the pathway to well-being and higher performance? And interesting enough, a third of the people in that group, right, thought it was a dirty word that is actually becoming misused.
Absolutely,
and in some
yes.
used to the point that it's kind of like code to basically just suck it up, tolerate bad behaviors, and do more with less. And, that blame piece that, if you complain or you kind of can't do it or you're not tough enough, it's like, literally not tough enough.
Definitely that not tough enough is coming through, isn't it? Like people are wearing the resilient badge like armor. I'm resilient, It's sort of like really putting on this face, this I mean, it's a tough word to use actually in business right now.
Yeah. And so the premise, how is it a bad story, is for me when the individual is blamed for something that's missing in the system, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not tough enough, you're not resilient enough, you're not bouncing back, you don't have this, your physical resilience, your mental, your spiritual resilience.
Yes.
And it's used as kind of a smokescreen, or this kind of term, I don't even know if it's a word, I made it up, which was cultural distraction. Like it distracts us from what really is going down in a culture, right?
Yes.
And instead of looking at the system and the whole and how it's interconnected and systemic, we go, we just need some resilience training, or you're not tough enough, or you're weak, or you're not good enough, or you need to develop in these areas.
Yeah, let's put the Band-Aid on it. Let's get in the trainers. Yep. Get
And
some resilience training on you. Go on.
and before anyone jumps on us, right? Resilience is a good thing.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
let's just for a moment like get that really clear, right? Personal resilience or personal responsibility and how I show up in the world, and how for me that's about fitness, right? How am I
Yeah.
mentally fit? How am I physically fit? How am I spiritually fit to cope with
Yes.
our crazy world, right?
Yeah.
And there's only more and more crazy stuff happening, and I'm, like cost of living, all the VUCA things, the war, not to mention ultra processed foods now, or the toxicity, I mean, the list is,
Yeah.
just goes,
Yeah.
right? Stress,
Lack of
overwhelm,
sleep, too much, overstimulation, all that stuff. Yep.
caffeine, blue light, blah, 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 all of that
Yep.
stuff, right? I mean, just to friggin' survive as a human being, you got to be resilient, right?
Exactly. We wouldn't be here right now. We didn't have some resilience.
And I heard, as we're recording this, Wimbledon's on, and today I, saw and heard this most amazing story about resilience. Right, well, I'm saying it's resilience. Was so this is the Ukrainian player Elena, and her surname escapes me at the moment, but she's now in the semi-finals. 6 months ago she had a baby. 3 months
Wow.
ago she started playing tennis again. Last week, she got the wild card into Wimbledon, and today she beat the world's #1 women's tennis player, to get her place in the semi-finals. Now, I mean,
Wow,
how resilient
fantastic.
is that? Like her
Yeah.
body,
Yeah.
like physically and
Yeah.
mentally, she was down and up in those sets, but she fought. And her part of her mental resilience is, she says, is now that best thing that ever happened to me was being a parent, but being a mum, and now I'm
Mhm.
fighting not only for her country but for her child. Right? I mean, how
Mm.
incredible! It's a goosebump kind of story, right?
Yeah.
And I mean that is all amazing resilience. So we're not talking about that stuff. We're
No.
talking about when it is abused
Misuse. Mm.
and or
Okay.
misused.
So,
So yeah,
yeah. So how can we make this good? A good work
how do we
story. Yeah.
how do we
Time
make
for a sip.
it time?
I'll have a sip of water.
Not a sponsors break, but a sip. Um, so I think when I was considering like how do we make this good? Well, I think the first
Mm.
thing is to continue to work on our own. What resonates for us as individuals, right?
Yeah.
So how are we happy with what we're working on as our resilience pieces,
Understand
right?
that's that self-awareness, isn't it? I mean, certainly for me during COVID, there was a lot of talk about resilience, and it did hit me. It did. I did
Mm,
find myself. I felt myself trapped. I felt myself, like I did have a fear reaction. And for me, one of the things was actually gratitude. I decided that pulling in a daily practice of gratitude, I was safe, I was in a beautiful place. This wasn't too apocalyptic. My family was with me. We were warm. We had, enough food. So for me, a lot of gratitude helped me in that time. So yeah, I think
mm.
self awareness about how you react and what your triggers are that might be taking you down. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And working that foundation, and anyone new to our channel, please look at past episodes, where we've talked a lot about the foundations around sleep, around nutrition, hydration, social movement. Movement saved my ass numbers of time, and my mental
Yeah.
well-being, like moving, being in nature, and getting all those foundational pieces in play, and making sure that they don't slip, right? Mindfulness,
Yeah.
the gratitude,
I mean,
all.
yesterday I had a bad day because I had a bad sleep. I just, literally struggled to, so my resilience was probably down. If you'd thrown a whole lot of stuff at me yesterday, extra to what I had on my agenda, in fact, already I had to put a few things off because I needed to focus on one piece of work. And literally, I didn't have the capacity because of my lack of energy to expand out, to do good quality work for clients. So, I focused on what I needed to do, but it was sleep that was causing my problem.
Yeah. And being able to adjust your decision making around that, like you just did, like to adapt and focus, like instead of pretending or trying to do everything, just, adapting with the energy, and attention that you had, right? So I think, continuing to have that awareness and work on our own resilience, whatever we're working on as a good habit is a great way to start. The second piece, which really feeds into, how do we make this a better story, is, to look for when it's like creep, the boundaries, when creep starts to happen. And my example is like, when the extreme behaviors, which, like a crisis happens, right, become the norm. So, for example, we've all, it's like, oh,
Yes.
I'm uncomfortable. We've got to push through. We've got to work hard. We've got to do this. We've got to do an all-nighter, or, like we just pulled together this week, and then suddenly that kind of, we're all in this together. We're pushing a little harder. We're expanding, our hours and our energy, and less sleep, less this, less that, for a specific purpose and result, becomes the normal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, we always do this, and if you can't you used to do it last week, why can't you do it this week?
Yep.
Well, last
I've
week it was.
often heard with teams that they say we're really good in a crisis, and I'm like going, okay, so what are you doing? And then in between the crises, they basically just relax and sit back and take some time, but ready for the next kind of. But that's not healthy. That's not a sign of a good way of working. To be just going from one crisis to the next.
And I think what we've become a lot stronger and more aware of is recovery, right?
Yeah.
So it's that recovery phase. And I think, in terms of, working with flow and personal recovery, professional recovery, athletes have this down. They go from, you could say, like one crisis, which is a performance, to the next. But in between, they have a very, very clear recovery protocol. And I just spent the last weekend with a group of CEOs, really working through what are their recovery protocols for life, right? In between the big ticket items in their life. And I think it's that creep, right? So, for example, speaking last weekend, right, I was up at 4:30 in the morning. Right, so already, and anyone who's travelled, you don't. Well, I don't sleep well. Do you sleep well the night before you travel?
Yeah, no.
My head is going around. Have I packed all the right things? I'm limited luggage carrying on. Have I got enough things? I mean, what's the weather like? Have I had the right clothes? And then have I got the right facilitation gear? And have I got power? Like all that stuff, right? And then you realise you're flying Ryanair and you have to print out stuff, right? Well, I do because passport, like all that stuff goes on. So then you literally get to the airport, right? And like you're I'm a bit wired. Then you're getting on a plane, and then you're getting off a plane, and it's suddenly 20 degrees hotter than it was where when you left.
Yeah,
you're dealing with all that stuff going on, right? And then
exactly.
I'm taking care of everything, and I'm trained to do this because I've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
But 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, I wouldn't have thought twice about doing this every week, every single week,
No.
right? I've done it.
That's right.
Done it for a long time, and I thought it was normal until you crashed. Well, I crashed, right? And then hang on, this is not normal, and this is not like a normal pattern. And I blew my adrenals out, superwoman stuff, and then you wonder why I'm exhausted. And you're going through menopause or what you're going through, and family stuff, and you think, oh.
Yeah, your
and
children. I did it when I had young children, and it's tough. It's really tough. Yeah, yeah.
And then
It's it's not a healthy way to live.
Yeah, exactly. So how do we like look at that and go, well, that's not actually and of course everyone will make their own mind up. But for me, it's like, that resilience is not that doesn't mean that I'm not resilient. It means that my recovery is different now that I'm, older, to actually, I have different needs of recovery. It's not that I'm not resilient. It's like
Yeah. The
different.
problem is that, that's a treating of machines, like humans like machines. It's, that basically, turn the switch and you're on and, pushing at full capacity. And, we want to get more and more out of these units. We want to, more higher production. There's, so much stress and yet we aren't machines. Things do
Yeah,
break. Things are not are required for us to be in optimal performance.
yeah.
um
And I think you hit on a word that I've like I've heard before, right? The machine analogy. And when I was looking at preparing for this thing, the word resilient has been used so much before HR people got a hold of it, or before it became into our kind of corporate vernacular. It was about machine. It was about organizations, machines, and things. Like
yeah.
the elasticity of nylon, for example. Like we came with
Yes.
the bouncing back, and then suddenly it's been
Yeah.
kind of transported into using with humans. So and then I'm
Yeah.
thinking, like, what else can we do in culture, right? So we need to be aware of our own level of fitness and what's right for us and values
Yes.
aligned and fit for purpose, right? What's our
Yes.
purpose as parents,
Yeah. Yeah.
as people. Then to be aware of this creep around extraordinary input for purpose, like, oh, I'm really excited to support this group of people, or hey, we have a crisis happening, or, like you've been working with your charities and, like you all hands on deck to support a particular purpose, right? I mean, happy to
Yeah.
do that. It's energizing, it actually is,
Yes.
it has that self regeneration piece. But when a culture hides the inadequacies through
Yeah.
the blame, shifting that blame. That to me is red light, warning signals going off all the time,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. And I think,
So what
like
would you
that.
do in an organization if that was what, how you were
Yeah,
experiencing it?
yeah. I mean, I think for me, one of the pieces is to go back to the, tool of reflection, right? Sort of
Mm.
say like, well, what's going on? Like, and that awareness of exhaustion and
Yeah.
pushing.
Yeah.
If things are hard, if we're not hitting flow, if we're not in getting it to a piece that it's regenerating, it's fun, we're collaborating, we're in the we're in that sweet spot, we're in the zone.
Yeah.
That what is going on? Like, why are we
Yeah.
pushing? What is going on that we're pushing up against?
Yeah.
Doing a regular debriefs. Just because it's busy, hard, huge workloads, and we're good at pushing through, doesn't mean it's the right thing.
No.
Like what are we really standing for? So I think it's kind of that a regular audit, of
Yeah.
what's going on is very useful. The regular debriefing, you and I've spoken,
Yeah.
a number of times on this,
Definitely.
about
Yes.
what's working, what's not, what do I do differently. We've talked about good, ugly, bad, and awesome.
Yeah.
What was me in this situation, and then really
Yeah.
following through. So you're really honouring the values and commitment and purpose that we have, and not letting the fact that we made that result, we got through it, kind of be the celebration piece. It's like, yes, and
Yeah.
what,
Yeah.
how can we continuously fine tune things so that
Yeah.
we can self generate? I don't know. Is there anything else that we're missing from that, do you
Totally.
think?
Yeah, and I think really understanding your triggers that really take you out when you feel like you're overwhelmed and you're not coping. I mean, the ability to bounce back needs nurturing. So, that what do you need in that time? Can you take a walk outside? Can you, this is the thing that, when like yesterday I was tired, I needed fresh air, I needed some energy,
Mm,
so I needed to do some exercise, and that helped me. But understanding, knowing those triggers and knowing what you can do to self-care through those times, so that you can get back into the zone, back on track with
yeah,
your own level of energy. Yeah.
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 Two
Definitely.
things. One is feeding off what you just said, and to realize that, because this came up in an exec coaching piece the other day, which was, and to realize that as actually work. It's not something that I
Yeah.
do on the side.
No.
It's actually, this is the work of leadership. Like my walk in the
Totally.
morning. is
Yes.
not skiving off.
No.
Actually, me walking in the morning is part of my work, right? Or
Totally.
getting my rebounder, or my breath work, my journal entering. It's all part of what the new definition of work is. And the other piece on
Exactly.
culture is, I think, as a tool to monitor this, is speaking up against the status quo,
Yeah.
right? And when did we last hear someone really challenge the way we do things around here? And did we listen to
Totally.
them?
Yeah. So
You
have
know,
courage, take heart, get involved in what is right, what is needed. And you won't be the only person that is suffering and struggling. And this is not a competition to see who can hang out the longest. Because basically, if you are silent in these toxic cultures, then you are a part of the problem just as much as everybody else. So speaking up and starting a turn for good, again, a raising awareness. So this is like having self-awareness, but also raising awareness in the organization. And as we always say, back to our purpose and our culture, what's in our values? Do we have care in our values? And yet we're treating everyone like, machines that can just work hard out 24/7 and with minimum maintenance. You wouldn't treat a high performance engine, that was, pushing out production. You wouldn't not have a maintenance schedule for it. You would not have, some downtime. So, let's make sure that we are aware of, our own awareness in the organisation, bringing that up. Totally.
Perfect. Love it. All right.
All
Well,
right.
thank you, everybody. Hopefully, you've several points that we've listed here, or chatted about. Emma and I are resonating with you. You know where to come if we understand that some things in your life, bad work stories, a kind of a little bit more urgent, or require a little bit more in depth. You know where to find us. All the details are below. But yeah, go make your bad work stories good. Bye for now.
See you. See you.